And Hugh talked to us a little bit about Solis's expertise in this area. Between our sponsors, Solis and Trina, I think you can just about get everything you need. So why don't we do this? We have about a half an hour, and Claire was kind enough to say I could continue on after that. I see for those of you who are participating, hopefully we'll try and get you in on the deadline. But why don't we start with today, Deepal? It's a pleasure to hear from you. I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about, your substantial history in renewables in Bangladesh, but also I'd like to hear from you where you think the solar market is going, what you think some of the trends are. Maybe some of our other speakers today could speak about that, but is that a good way to set the stage, Deepal? Would that be an okay question to have you start us off with identifying Bangladesh trends and direction?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon from Bangladesh, distinguished panelists and the moderator and also participants. So I think this is a very good webinar because there is a lot of preparation. I think this is good. So we have some homework yesterday also. So for Bangladesh, because we are involved one with the renewable energy from 1996, being a managing director of Daman Shakti. At that time, we tried only 15% people have electricity in 1996. Right now, 99%, 85% no electricity. So we are traveling in the village, people asking us, oh, you're providing microcredit, but we need electricity. So then we tried solar, biomass, and wind energy. Finally, we tried to bring wind turbine from Oklahoma, USA, and also biomass, biogas plant, and the solar. And the cost was very high, $7 per peak watt, now 20 cents like this. So it was huge cost. So we designed a 17-watt panel for the solar home system. I go through all the documents with the different continent. I found solar home lighting, but I gave a different name, solar home system. From that, we give a journey, around 6 million system installed, the largest in the world. Then igniting the solar energy is very popular in Bangladesh. Everybody knows it. Even poor people, they know solar energy, solar panel, everything. So this is one positive thing in Bangladesh. Around 15% people using now solar energy daily basis for their livelihood, for their education, for their children education, everything. So then gradually solar irrigation is coming up in Bangladesh. 1.13 million diesel pump running by the pump in the middle of the field, agricultural field. Now we are gradually replacing through solar irrigation. I am also involved in this journey. And utility scale is growing around 800 megawatt, around 600 megawatt, but in the pipeline more than 1,000 megawatt. But we are arguing how to increase it. But unfortunately, land is the precious item, and we are arguing with the government. Government 100 economic zone, but why not every zone at least 500 megawatt or 100 megawatt or 200 megawatt land demarcated for the solar energy. We are arguing, we are debating ourselves in this policy making. And the solar rooftop fortunately is growing, but the speed is very low. And from Kainat, Mr. Kainat, engineer Kainat, SREDA member, he mentioned about the 45 megawatt already grown last 2-3 years. But still, we are, and our colleague, Mr. Nurul Akhtar, will speak about the financing mechanism and payment. I think the solar rooftop has a good chance. And I calculated myself, we have 100,000 primary school, high school, colleges, masjid, madrasa, temple, so many things. If we get a 5 kilowatt in every rooftop, actually we can get so many thousand megawatt. So I think there is a future. One, I see solar rooftop has a future. Utility scale and floating solar. Bangladesh is a country of riverine country, floating solar, and have a 10% renewable energy by 2020, but only 3% we achieve, not 7% still we are lagging behind. The macro environment is good. Only we need a kind of a connecting between the ball and bat. Otherwise, it's not growing. One is our Honorable Prime Minister recently in the Glasgow COP26, she mentioned that 40% of renewable energy mix with the total energy generation by 2041. We have now 3%. So at that time, it will be 60,000 megawatt. So in that calculation, 40% is a huge amount. And another positive thing is coming up, Muji Prosperity Plan. It's not yet finalized, but it is under discussions going on. Government going to take this Muji Prosperity Plan from climate vulnerability to the climate prosperity. So in that sense, we calculated we have a lot of debate in ourselves and dialogue, and it call also facilitating. So in that case, we are expecting around 6,000 megawatt from this prosperity plan, Muji Prosperity Plan. There are phase 1, phase 2, or option 1, option 2. I think this is another interesting case. And there is a 5-year plan. Government recently, from 2021 to 2025, in the 5-year plan, government mentioned that from now they will give importance then fossil fuel to the renewable energy. Financing incentive will be given to the renewable energy. So we are as an association, as a well-wisher of this, we are connecting all these dots. In the 5-year plan, the government mentioned there will give incentive, financing facility for the renewable energy growth, and the SREDA is there. And also we have a Muji Prosperity Plan, and we have a solar roadmap. We are debating ourselves in the SREDA, and also Honorable Prime Minister given a commitment in the international level, 40% will be energy mix from renewable sources. And Bangladesh have a potentials of solar and wind and other renewable energy. So in that things, and we have developed some kind of a potential that we have a climate vulnerable forum. Our Honorable Prime Minister, second time the chairperson of this vulnerable forum. So she articulated that now there are 55 countries. It was 48 countries, now 55 countries joining the climate vulnerable forum. And they decided the 100% renewable energy by 2050, all the countries. So this is an inspiration goal, as Bangladesh is a part of this. And then what I'm thinking, how to technology transfer is very important. In considering Bangladesh, and we have seen Trina Solar and other very, very professional company, they are ventilating in Bangladesh is good. The technology transfer is one of the important things. And also we need a capacity development, human resources, training resources, planning capacity, skill development, and funding. We need a concessional grant, revolving funding, climate funding. There is a climate financing, is the mitigation funding, adaptation funding, and this and the climate funding is there. But we need to articulate it, and we are also discussing so many things. That's why in Bangladesh, I'm always promoting one thing. We need a renewable energy ministry. We need a government champion, because the private sector, we are also discussing so many things, but we need a sincere effort from the government. The policy is there, but not implementing. Target is there, is not implementing. So we need a budget every year for renewable energy. We need a ministry that can take care of it. Under the Ministry of Power, this is now electricity, 100% electricity they are trying to develop. So the conflict of interest is there. That's why we are ventilating the idea, at least we need a division leading to a ministry. Initially, if you have a ministry, it's expensive, but we can develop a division. So recently, government decided very good. I met the secretary now as a chairperson of the SREDA. She's a full secretary. Otherwise, everybody comes after 2 years they retire. So someone start and retire. I saw 4 chairmen retire in only 3-4 years time. So there is a kind of sustainability in the also SREDA. So now she took a bold step. She come from the Prime Minister office. She joined as a SREDA chairperson. I met her, and we met her, and she took a challenge. This is a kind of a dumping ground like this. Nobody comes in a very prospect people, but she took a challenge. This is a very positive aspect. So we encourage her. So there is an opportunity actually. The land of opportunity, Bangladesh, is growing a developing country and a middle income country, and 2040 developed country. I believe we need to create a mechanism how to the 40% by renewable energy by 2041, and the economic growth is sustainable growth is there. We have a rooftop, we have a, if we get land demarcated for the renewable sources, 2,000, 4,000 megawatt easily we can produce it, but we don't have a funding mechanism. Only the foreign fund coming or investment company coming, and they are facing problem for procuring land and the transparent policy. The unsolicited proposal is there, but actually you need a political connection, you need a strong people. Even I have offered from the foreign company, we can go for a 8,800 megawatt, but actually land is it. So you don't find a good people how to a sustainable way how to invest from the foreign sources also. There is an opportunity. So, but there is a good heart at the top level. So, but we don't have any mid-level people in there. So this is the reality. But I believe once Bangladesh, I grow up here, I know, I think once they see the positive things is there, everybody jumping. So we need to create a kind of positive demonstration, then it will work. And if you consider the geopolitical situation in the whole world, now the cost of electricity will grow because the LNG, everything is cost is growing. So and Bangladesh earning foreign exchange through the garments and the ceramic and agricultural product, they will be shaken because the electricity cost is high, then the price will high and this advantage will be lose. That's why renewable energy is very, very important to promote it, to connect it, to develop it. I believe there is a good chance, and we have a lot of discussion going on in the intellectual level and other level. Everybody now in Bangladesh recommending renewable energy to grow it. So we are going to invite Salimul Haq is a climate expert. He always writing now, I brief him about the renewable energy. He always write about the renewable energy every day in the Daily Star newspaper. So I think we have a good development. So I see there is a prospect, only we need to connecting the dot to something happening in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Great comments, Deepal. I mean, there was a very lot in there. So thank you for putting that all out. And we would expect nothing less from you. Your experience is formidable. So thank you for that. I mean, I think it's interesting when you talk about the 5-year plan, needing a budget to back that up, needing the right organizational capability within Bangladesh to do that. But fortunately, you do still have a significant amount of gas production within the country to bridge that gap. We'll just see what the coal space happens with here. But I'm going to move over to Florian now. Florian and I have been on presentations before, and I always enjoy talking to Florian about his particular experiences on the ground. The question I wanted to talk with Florian about at Symbior is what type of growth are we going to see? We heard from the Trina and the Solus folks, but we really didn't talk about the type of growth we might see around ground mounted or rooftop versus floating. And I'm curious, Florian, if you have any experience in that regard and how you see that developing over time. And then I'll come back to you in a little bit and talk to you about some of the particular challenges that you and I would like to raise and hopefully stimulate some interest or discussion around that. Is that fair, Florian?
Yes, of course.
All right.
Very good to see you again virtually, Joseph, and glad to be. Just a background, Symbior, together with our partner Paragon Group, have a joint venture in Bangladesh, one of the first large-scale solar projects up in the northwest in Panchgarh, Tetulia area. It's an 8 megawatt project. Half of it is on the roof, half of it is on the ground, using basically an industrial facility to anchor the plant. Also in being mindful of one of the key constraints that developers are facing in Bangladesh, which is the access to land, which I'm sure we're going to talk a bit more later on. I just want to add a little bit to Deepal's comments, because I think I've seen that in many places that actually reality is quickly overtaking some of the more cautious goals that some of the countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia in particular have set for themselves. We have to be mindful that a lot of the large industrial countries in the world have committed to net zero achieving net zero between somewhere in 2040 and 2070. And so the big neighbor India is on the later end of that scale, but China 2060, Germany 2045. So this will mean a massive shift of the global energy industry. And so I think personally, I believe that all the goals that we've talked about right now, 20% renewable energy by 2040, those will be overtaken by reality on in the world, and the dynamics that are starting to really gain traction at the moment. And I think what is a little bit hard to see is that unfortunately, I think Bangladesh has so far not lived up to its potential. I don't believe this is really lack of funding, but really lack of a streamlined process and a unified action that allows the projects to go forward within the general framework, especially under the IPP, which is very strong. So personally, to answer your question, Joseph, I would still expect that most of the growth of the solar industry in Bangladesh would come from the traditional ground-mounted and ground-mounted projects. We will see, and we are seeing, a number of floating projects starting right now, using some of the areas that are either being used for other activities like fish farming and so on and so forth. But please be reminded that areas like the many rivers that you see in Bangladesh, they are usually also used as waterways, and there are many challenges in terms of the natural conditions there that make it maybe not an obvious choice for a floating solar farm. So I would be very cautious in terms of those water bodies being used. Anything that's related to dams, water reservoirs, etc. I think those should be a high priority, and actually the organizations that run these reservoirs should be part of this, and I think could do that very effectively. But the bulk of the installation, in my opinion, would still be on the ground-mounted installations in the future. The challenge with the rooftop, while this actually was for a long time the majority of the business that Symbio has been doing, we're continuing that under the brand of BECIS in Southeast Asia, India, and China, is challenged in Bangladesh mainly because it doesn't have some of the support mechanisms that we find in the for IPPs. So if I personally could see a large boom that would be supporting activities there, especially as we see now with electricity prices trending upwards, which makes all of these kind of retail price-based activities, installing solar panels, selling the power directly to the off-takers rather than to the grid, quite attractive. But what is missing here is the ability to, effectively manage, for example, the financing with some of the preferences that were talked about earlier, that are given to foreign investors, particularly, but also to local outfits that are investing in this activity. And I think that if there is a real will to support the sector, streamlining some of the challenges, I think would be what would be needed to really kickstart it. Other than that, I can tell you that we have looked at a number of opportunities, and we have to admit that we find them challenging to balancing the risk and reward profile of private off-taker opportunities in Bangladesh. And I would like to highlight here one other item. One of the staple industries in the country, the textile industry, while there is increasing pressure on bringing up sustainability approaches to the industry, the fundamental way that this industry works with generally relatively short-term contracts from the global buyers to the local manufacturers of, let's say, 1 to 3 years, difficult to, for example, provide renewable energy contracts that will generally have a tenor of maybe 10 to 15 years. So you have a bit of a misalignment in terms of the commitment from the global buyers with respect to what a renewable energy supplier would require in order to have a bankable project. So that's one particular challenge for this particular industry, which is of course very important for Bangladesh. Maybe I'll stop here.
Well, those are great comments. I mean, maybe we just jump into the two things I said that we could talk about later. I mean, you raised some of the barriers to entry or some of the opportunities where you could see improvement. Could you raise the examples that you had we had talked about earlier, you and I, now just as examples?
Yeah, sure.
I can move to Nimiar to talk about some of the additional challenges then, okay?
No problem. Again, I think you already have land as one of the key items I think that many people are aware of. So I'll skip that for now, and I think you plan to discuss that at a later stage. But you know, just from our experience, the one of the challenges that we've been facing is foreign remittances. So working with international experts, which, you know, to be fair, is still important, especially when there's foreign financing involved, when there is, you know, international standards being imposed by one of the parties in the consortium. Oftentimes, some of these skills are not yet readily available within Bangladesh, and it is important to be able to work with foreign experts either on the technical side but also on the legal structuring and financing side. And I have to tell you that it is very, very difficult to make payments to parties outside of Bangladesh for those kind of services. And this is one of the main headaches that we have been facing when we executed our project. The second point is insurance. At the moment, the insistence generally for solar project is that Shadran Bima is the sole insurance provider. There are some gaps in this approach sometimes, and there is the ability to talk to IDRA, the regulator, to request an exemption. But this is not an easy process. And to be fair, the cost of Shadran Bima as well as the credit rating makes it a very difficult solution to use, especially when there is international financing involved, and that can bring an additional challenge that, in my opinion, is really unnecessary. So freeing up, allowing free choice of insurance for these projects will actually have a substantial positive benefit, especially during the operational phase, where that is a significant cost for running these projects. And lastly, I think this is just a cautionary tale. The reliability of the irradiance data within Bangladesh tends to be have a lot higher inaccuracy than what we've been facing in Southeast Asia, particularly. And so that can really lead to false assumption in terms of the yield of the project. And so, for example, requiring the solar projects to supply their irradiance measurements, because every project will have parameters installed on site, and so collecting their own data. If those have to be provided to say SREDA and made publicly available to create an increasingly accurate data set of ground stations, which then over time will also be incorporated into the data sets that are commonly used for the simulations. I think that will help everyone have a better and more reliable data set and basis for the economic assumptions, and probably also avoid some projects that I'm sure will face challenges, especially with some of the service providers where we've seen deviations of up to 20% in terms of the actual yield, which really could sink a project, and put the project into default, and then probably whoever provided that financing will for a long time have a hard time coming back to the industry.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Florian. I mean, I think you and Deepal are aligned here. Is the sooner we have this integration of an implementing agency that has a budget and has the connectivity, even some of the lessons from the petroleum or from the fossil fuel area from Petrobangla can shift over, and we can learn a little more about the repatriation of costs amongst these various renewable industries. But good points. But what I'd like to do now is move over to Numiar Inam from Univergy, and maybe you could pick up the topic again then and talk to us a little bit about some of the opportunities and challenges that you're facing or that you'd like to raise today, and perhaps some of the solutions or some of the focuses you'd like to bring to our attention. Is that okay, Numiar, or did you want to discuss something else?
Yeah, that works out. That works out well.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Neo Venture, for organizing this wonderful session. I just want to add that we are having very heavy torrential rains in our part, so internet might be a little bit disrupting from time to time, and you might hear some thunders in the background. So I would like to apologize for that in the beginning. So let me quickly start. People have been very patiently waiting, and it's coming towards the end of the session. So let's start with the land issue. That, yeah, we do have a land problem and all, but I would like to point out that we are all the developers, and when I say we, I am talking almost representing some of the developers, because as I have worked with Canadian Solar, Sky Power, and now with Univergy, all the developers face the primary problem of land. Because when we are looking for a land in Bangladesh, we are looking into the financiers guideline that the land has to be very close to the substation. The land, there has to be a main road connected with the land, and the land has to be out of the flood zone. Now, Bangladesh is a riverine country. We have so many rivers crisscrossing all over Bangladesh. So finding a spot of land which is outside the flood zone is, I will say, it's almost impossible, because the whole country is built on a floodplain. Next issue is when it comes to the land, even if we are finding the land which is suitable, we find that the paperwork of the landowner is not up to date. The land tax is not there, and the distance from the main road or road connectivity is high. The reason is our government has very specifically mentioned that you can only develop solar assets in land which is non-agricultural, to lands which are non-agriculture in nature, which means the land does not have too much of economic value to the landowner. So what we see is the land is, according to the government land records, the land is recorded in the name of the grandfather. But after the grandfather, right now the grandson is enjoying the rights of the land, but he has not transferred the land in his name. And the main reason is because they're not earning any subsistence out of the land. So there is absolutely no reason for them to do some capital injection and up to date the land paperwork and all. And when developers, lawyers start looking into the land and they say that, oh, the paperwork is not up to date because we do not have a chain of landowner who are owning it right now, as opposed to what is mentioned in the books. Now, there are possible ways of fixing this problem, but we have to take a bit patient approach. The first step is to get the land approved by the government. If the government says that, yep, you can develop solar projects over here, solar assets over here, the land is not a non-agricultural land. Next issue is correcting the land paperwork. We have to sit with the local land officers, the city, the ward councillors or commissioners, who can give the certificate of the succession certificate, which is going to prove that from grandfather, father, uncles, and the son, the chain of ownership pattern is established. So like that, we can take over this problem of paperwork, which is related with the land, which is suitable for solar development. Next issue is the tax. We will see that the most of the lands have not, the landowners have not paid tax in last 20, 25 or 30 years. And the same reason, the explanation is the same, because they're not earning anything out of the land. And as a result, they do not find the necessity to up to date the tax and revenues. So over here, what we can do as developers, that when we are making the land purchase agreement with the landowner, we are going to get into a frame where we say that, okay, X amount is the amount we are going to pay you for the price of the land, and Y amount is the accrued tax on the land, and this is something we are going to pay directly to the exchequers or directly to the revenue office. And like that, we can up to date the paperwork. And the last issue is the flood related. The land which are suitable for developing solar project, we will see that 2 meters or 3 meters, they will be submerged during the wet season, monsoon season. So this is something what we require is an engineering solution, that we have to develop the structures in such a manner that, like, we can look into this 3 to 6 meters, 2 to 3 meters of water logging during the wet monsoon season. And then there are like a lot of lands which are available in the river banks and all. And for these lands, we see that a 50 megawatt or a 30 megawatt project is not feasible, because the amount of money we have to spend on embankment and amount of money we have to spend to raise the ground. But if we do hydro engineering, and if we work with other stakeholders closely, we can put the dam, we can do the riverbank embankment, and we can see that instead of 50 megawatt, we can actually generate 300 to 400 megawatt in that land. And when we are looking into that big number of generation, the money we are going to spend on the dam and the money we are going to spend on raising the ground, it is going to make sense. It's not going to make sense if we develop a 30 megawatt size project, but for a 300 megawatt size project, this is going to make sense. So if we are looking into grid tight projects, big projects, 50 megawatt, 100 megawatt project, we have to go into very challenging sites, very challenging locations. Solution. I would not like to about this land related issues too much, because we have done a lot of chit chat on this. I would like to focus a bit on the rooftop commercial and industrial sector. Now, starting with this, that in COP26, our government has said that 40% of our electricity is going to come from renewable energy. And by 2041, we do expect that approximately 50,000 megawatt energy will be generated. So 40% of 50 megawatt is approximately 20,000 megawatt. So we are targeting 20% megawatt. Now, if we look at it like this, that as a student, we are just targeting our pass mark, that if we can do 40%, we are good. We don't have to go for net zero. We don't have to be very ambitious and all. 40% is good, a job well done, everybody is happy. But when you are targeting a passing mark, you have already failed. We are already failing by not being ambitious, by not being able to do more what we can do. Now, in government, there are a lot of studies have been done. Some experts have identified that there are approximately 5,000 buildings, government buildings, which are owned by government, and they have identified that approximately 2,000 megawatts can be generated. EatCall has done extensive studies on the rooftops of the industries and all, and they have identified 7,000 ready-made garment manufacturing plants in Bangladesh, which has the potential to generate approximately 5,000 megawatt. They have also identified other rooftop areas like cold storage, pharmaceuticals, steel, cement industries, and other kind of industries where additional 5,000 megawatt can be generated. Altogether, we can see that our 100% potential to generate is approximately 12,000 megawatt from the rooftop sectors. Now, going back to this COP26 declaration, 40% is going to come by 2041. Now, 2041 is 19 years away, and this is like we are setting ourselves a target for which we will probably not be there to enjoy the benefit, or we will probably not there to see that whether we have done 40% or not. It's a far away thing. We can pass our life saying that, okay, we have tried, the next generation is failing, they're unable to reach the goal. But this amount, 40%, if you look into it, or how much we want to look into it, this is something we can do much faster. Why not target 2024? Why not target 2025? And then everybody is going to ask, oh, we have already discussed that we do not have the land, we do not have the infrastructure. How are we going to connect another 20,000 megawatt of renewable? Where is the land? Where are we going to develop? Now, I have just mentioned that approximately 12,000 megawatt can be generated from rooftop. And instead of comparing ourselves with countries like India, Australia, European countries, it will be like comparing, it's not going to be comparing oranges to Mozambique, or it's like comparing oranges to Apple. India, they have huge amount of desert space. In Australia, they have unbelievable amount of space which is vacant. Nothing is happening. So they can do this. We have to use what we have, and we have to utilize our resources accordingly. Now, let us compare ourselves with Vietnam. Now, this is not, I mean, all the socio-economic, all the indicators of Vietnam is something very, very similar to Bangladesh. They are also a very industrial country of trying to becoming an industrial country. They have a huge setup of industries and everything. What Vietnam has done in 2019, they had 378 megawatt of rooftop. By 2020 December, they have added 9.3 gigawatt of rooftop in only 1 year. And out of that 9.3 gigawatt, 6 gigawatt has been added in the month of December. Now, Vietnam is a country, as I just mentioned, is something very similar to Bangladesh in terms of the socio-economic, all the indicators, economic growth and everything. If Vietnam can do this, what is stopping us from achieving these kind of targets? Vietnam has done something very, very simple. They did not go into the details of setting up the project on grid type on large land area. What they have done is they have motivated and they have encouraged the rooftop owners to convert. That fit-in tariff is there. They have given a fantastic fit-in tariff, which made economic sense to everybody, the people who are installing it, the people who are developer for it. And they have just gone ahead and installed 6 gigawatt in 1 month, 9 gigawatt in 1 year, only on the rooftop connected to the grid. If we copy the same thing for Bangladesh, let us not look into those 500, 300, 400 megawatt size projects. Let us just copy this model and apply it for Bangladesh. Our government has done, our think tanks has done all the studies. They came up with the number 12,000. So let us get rid of 2,000 from this 12,000. Let's work with 10,000 megawatt. If we can, if government gives incentives that say by 2025, convert the rooftops into, you set up the solar panels on your rooftop and put it in the grid, you are going to get X amount of cents as your fit-in tariff. This is something we can do.
I think that's a great challenge. I think you've given us our talking point, Numir. I think that's the right thing for the message. I think back to recent discussions and programs like this in Malaysia, where the same challenge was issued to identify that government rooftop space that they could attack first because of the opportunities they had to approve their own projects. And so I think you're touching on something, and I think you and Deepal and Florian might well be in violent agreement here that there are some opportunities that we can move to advance this, at least to meet the metrics that have been established by COP26. So thank you for that. Let me do one housekeeping matter here. Florian, I believe you have a question on the screen. If you could take a look at from Imran Chowdhury. If you can't answer that, we'll answer it at the end. But Numir, let me move over to Karim. He's been patient and waiting. Karim, you're the executive director of EDPA. You have a great project finance and renewables history. I was hoping you could comment on how we could improve the solar market. We're not saying that it's behind, but what type of improvements that you could see. We could talk about third-party ownership. We could talk about corporate PPAs. We could talk about peer-to-peer trading, but what do you see and what is your vantage point? You could bring forward some of the lessons from Florian and from Numir and from Deepal if you want to, or you can share some new thoughts, but let me turn it over to you, okay?
Well, thank you very much. And honestly, the previous speakers I mean, they made fantastic points and it's very much detailed. So it's challenging to bring new ideas, but I'll try. Look, well, maybe a short, introduction. So EPDA, we are a project originator. So meaning that we source project for investors. So we are looking at market trends, especially in Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, a bit of Europe and a bit of Africa. So we're looking at changes in regulatory framework and in generally the renewable energy markets, and try to find the right transactions for our selected investors. So that's what we do. So we work in different countries. Bangladesh is one of them. And I've been working for the past 3 years trying to pursue different opportunities there. And unfortunately for now, nothing has really materialized. Like Florian, actually, we've been looking at many different projects. And so far we found the risk on the land, on the grid connection, on price and everything very challenging. So we're more on utility scale projects. So it's usually more than 20 or 50 megawatts that we're looking at. So let me, so we had different discussions with the government and BPDB. And frankly speaking, nobody was really convinced about the idea of doing solar in Bangladesh. And even with different lenders that closed deals in Bangladesh, this discussion pop up because, there's a scarcity of land. Rooftop is challenging, but our friend Numer, who knows very well this, actually, says that there is a 12 gigawatt potential. So certainly this is something that should be, exploited, something that should be, done. But still, the challenges in terms of price, land, etc. So, when you look at these facts, you're wondering where's the strategy, and where's the energy strategy? So what are the different options for Bangladesh? So you do have gas reserves, right? But they are depleting somehow, so it's not long term. And plus, you have the CO2 emissions issue. In the power sector, you have also a lot of HFO running, and similarly, it's costly and it's not really good for the environment, and plus emissions and so on. So HFO and gas, okay, coal. It's very difficult to finance coal, and honestly, this is like the super no-go for the energy transition. This is the worst. This is the most, the biggest nightmare. Increasing the share of coal. I mean, so implementing new coal. And anyway, the government a few years ago, just wrapped up the write-off actually many projects, many coal projects. So what's left? So you have solar and you have wind, but the wind actually, the potential is very small. But I'm speaking under the, maybe other speakers have a different view on that. But frankly, it's mostly in, Cox's Bazar and so on. And there is the, typhoons issue and so on. It's very difficult actually. And even that, the wind speed on a yearly basis, it's not that much. It's very difficult. We look at the project there, actually 30 megawatt. It's very complicated. And so you have solar, but solar is not enough, right? To do an energy transition, because it's basically producing only daytime, right? So you have the issue of balancing, supply and demand all the time. So my first point would be that where is this energy strategy, energy transition strategy, whereby by 2040 or 50 or whatever, the country has done a clear energy transition, moving from fossil fuels, which are anyway not sustainable at all, not only for the climate, but for price and availability and so on. So where is it? And as long as I believe the country has not addressed this issue properly, we'll find this regulatory framework, as Florian mentioned rightly, and labs also very challenging. There is no one-stop shop. The Prime Minister was, very upset by the LOIs which were issued many years ago, which did not materialize. Where is the land to, how do you prepare the land and so on? Where's the land to install the solar projects and so on? So it's as long as there is no proper answer for that, I believe that this is something where it would be difficult to move into the gigawatt scale. So that's number one. But then also it's also difficult to let's suppose that we don't answer yet to this question, and we just move forward and let market, goes, and private sector, install wherever, you have a feed-in tariff on the rooftop, and you make the proper regulatory framework for the land, for the ground mountain projects. Look at how you develop projects in Bangladesh. The country is basically, you have a flooding issue right on all the sides, so how to develop this project. So when you develop these projects, you need $1 million extremely rapidly to conduct all the studies, because you have the logistics study, you have the flooding issues, you have, even storm or, whatever, so it's extremely costly, plus all the illegal issues that our friend Numera actually, perfectly, described, so all these legal fees and so on, it's very challenging, very costly. So for a private developer to secure the appropriate land, it takes time, effort, a lot of money. And in terms of, PPA price at the end of the day, are we going to be that competitive, as competitive as the country would expect, so you can't let, if you want to develop massively, and I join here, Numer, actually, you can't let the private sector just like that, it's just not going to work. You need to have the proper, and as Florian said, you need to streamline the process. You need to identify land, and develop the land. So we talk with different entities, like, for example, industrial sites where it's institutions, they manage the industrial zone, like Beza, for example, among others. So they do have like big piece of land, but it's maybe 30, 40 kilometers away from the substation. It's surrounded as usual by rivers and so on. So you need to understand, are you going to build dikes and so on? So if you want to use this site, which, you can probably do 2 or 3 gigawatts actually there, you can actually split it into different sites where developer would come. And that's, for example, in India, it's called solar park. So you have a developer which is developing solar park and splitting the land, and everyone is sharing the connection cost and sharing, different costs here and there. And that would be probably a right approach, where, something has to be prepared in advance, So how do you prepare that? You need to have this, long-term strategy in the country. So I believe that would be somehow how to unlock that, would be to have this framework strategy, and then have the government help the private sector to pre-develop some of the projects in certain locations, and try to invite different developers, or have a proper framework for them to develop it, and to secure their somehow exit, as a developer, with the proper PPA, with the proper implementation agreements, which are there for the HFO, which have been closed, and CCGT also with IFC. So the bankable documentation exists in the country. And last point would be probably the economic equation that we need to find, because today you can't have a public institution saying that, okay, my land is available, but the cost is like 6 million, 10 million per year, and also, if I develop, I take these shares, etc. So it's okay to do that. In all countries, for example, Morocco, etc., where you have the government preparing pre-developing projects, it's, they charge a fee, etc. So that's exactly the right framework for a country. That's fine. But the equation for now is not very clear, most probably because business model of solar is quite new compared to fossil fuel. So the returns, are much lower. It's long term, it's lower, and so they need to adjust probably price of land, and basically the success fee, somehow the development fee that institutions should expect to the proper, to this, sector. So that would be the three things. And, you can see all these challenges materialize in previous tenders, because there was tenders and they are not executed. And for these reasons, because land was not prepared, economic was very difficult, and so on. So this whole preparation, I would say that would be the key, a key to unlock probably the sector.
So those are great comments. And I think the land issue, we started with it, we came back to it. But I think you guys are the voices of reason here. And I think from Deepal to you, to Florian, to Numiar, and we didn't have Akhtar come on. He had to take a leave of absence right as we started. You guys are the leaders on this issue. You guys are the voices of reason. And so thank you for talking today. I'd like to also thank Energy Talks and Neo Ventures for this, and also the Trina Solar and Solus folks for putting on some great presentations today to keep us up to date. I'm not going to try and summarize what we've heard. You've heard the topics. These are exciting times. The folks on this call are the leaders. It's been my pleasure today to help lead this discussion. I think we've answered all of the questions in the question room except the one. I believe that one question was probably best left for Al-Amin, and maybe he can reach back out to the question panel later on. But let me turn this back over to Claire to conclude for us. And to the panelists, thanks again for the great information. You're clearly the best in the business here, and it was a pleasure talking to you today.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. Actually, we're working from at home, so the internet is quite not stable. But anyway, thank you. So thank you all of our audience for joining today's webinar, and we really appreciated all speakers' great support and valuable comments for this market. And we will share the recording and PowerPoint slides used of today's webinar to your registration email by the end of next week. Should you have any questions, please also be free to contact our team through the email addressing showing on the slides right now. And thank you, Mr. Joseph and Mr. Florian Benhold, Mr. Numiar, Mr. Karim, and Mr. Deepal. Thank you, all of you. And on 26th this month, we will have a regional webinar about Central Asia renewable energy market. So please to make sure to follow the Energy Talks webinar on LinkedIn to get our first-hand webinar update information. Thank you again. Let's see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank
Have a
you very
nice
much.
day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.